The school district faced a deadline. If it didn't integrate its schools by the next school year, it would lose federal funding. Dr. Thomas Guilford was the superintendent of schools. Herbert Field had been chairman of the Sarasota County School Board for nearly 12 years, and he was reappointed during the time of Sarasota's desegregation. Field oversaw the development of 6 plans to comply with the court order. Plan 6 would redraw the line so that Booker would be a neighborhood school for both black and white students. Plan 1 was very different. It called for the closure of Booker schools over the course of 4 years. On the court, none of this got in the way of the tornadoes.
We had high expectations on the team. The coaches had high expectations on, around the state of Florida had high expectations on, because we were ranked, at that time, we were ranked number 1 in the state of Florida. And so our expectation, where everybody knew that we were going to at least play in the final.
Sarasota seemed to be exactly what Ada Mae hoped for. The sleepy little town was rich in history, the arts, powdery white sands, and palm trees, but not everyone could enjoy it equally.
We were raised over town. It's called the Rosemary District now. So there was certainly separation where we were, where we lived. They called it Black Bottom. We called it the community.
Further south of that area, that's where Caucasians were living. And they had a problem when they wanted to literally visit people at the Rosemary Cemetery that's located off Central. They did not want to walk through the area that was known as Black Bottom, known where African Americans were living. And as such, they began to go gradually force the African Americans to move in what we now consider the Newtown area.
Desegregation, racism was all around me, because the boundaries of my community was, you could go to the railroad track to the east, you could go to Coconut to the west, and you can go to 10th to the north, and you could go to 4th to the south. And that was the boundaries. When you cross over them, you was identified as outside of your neighborhood.
Crossing those tracks, you did that at your own risk, because you didn't know what was on the other side of those tracks, because we'd been told, don't go on the other side of the tracks. The first time I ever saw a white person was on our side of the tracks. And I ran home and I said, Mom, I saw this, I don't know what it was. And she said, I described it, and she said, oh, that's just a white person. I said, what's a white person? I've never seen a white person. And she said, well, they are there, but be careful, don't look at them, don't talk to them, just stay away.
Sarasota used to be what they call a sundown town. And that was known throughout the South. That was a term meaning that if you were black, by the time the sun went down, you had to be back into the community where you lived.
Booker was a school in the community that everything kind of rallied around the high school. We had a tremendous support system. The teachers, the principal was a very supportive system. Parents during that period, they would took the word of the teacher. The teacher was kind of like the grown up in the community, and anything your kid had done anything wrong, if they checked with the teacher and they validated it, they get punished. So the school was very, very important. Booker was very, very important.
The Booker schools were named after Emma E. Booker, a teacher in the Sarasota community during the 1910s. Her passion was the proper education of the black community. They had no school buildings. She taught them in churches, and they used hand-me-down books from the white students. Funding for the Booker schools followed.
And so now I'm impressed when I go to Greater Hearst Chapel Church, or when I go to Bethlehem, I'm not just visiting church. Now I know Bethlehem Church was the first African-American church in Newtown. Bethlehem Church Board of Trustees were the first ones to pay for the salary of Emma E. Booker, who later became the Booker principal. And now all of it connects.
Students were separated all over the country based on race. You had black schools, you had white schools. Here in Sarasota, you had Booker High School. In Manatee County, you had Lincoln Memorial High School. Those high schools were set up solely for African American students because those students couldn't go to white high school.
Something was brewing on the basketball court. The Tornadoes had lost in the state final the year before. They planned to finish the job this time. When they started the journey, they needed a center. Now Coach Baker had one who had literally landed at his doorstep.
Well, we had high expectations, as I said, from 7th grade on up. We knew at that time that we had about, as I said earlier, we had about 10 basketball players who could really play. And then along came Howard Porter. We had everything but a dominant center. And here comes Howard Porter as a sophomore coming into Booker High School, who was 6'7", 6'8", which was very tall during those days. So that's all we needed was him.
Even the playoffs were segregated in Florida in 1967, 13 years after the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional.